My apologies for being late with today's video report, but better late than never. Unfortunately, I had a appointment today, another follow-up with my lovely surgeon, and he's like an hour and a half away to and from, and I just simply ran out of time. But he gave me some good news today. He said, hey, another 6 to 12 weeks, and I should finally be healed. Now, considering it's 17 weeks since the surgery, another 6 to 12 weeks for something that should have been 4 to 6 weeks originally, and then it was 8 to 10 weeks. I don't know. Modern math, I think my physician absolutely failed in that department, or my body simply didn't want to adhere to the modern math principles. But hey, at least we're making progress. Okay, let's talk about Monday's action. But before we get to the free play on Dallas and Oklahoma City, let's talk about a little something different because, I have always felt that part of these video reports, well, they should be educational in nature. And I've got to tell you guys, tonight, my best bet is once again in one of the minor league tournaments, which rescued me yesterday, broke my losing streak as I turned to the Texas A&M Corpus Christi Highlanders, who delivered with an easy win as a 1.5-point dog yesterday, cashing in against Fort Wayne with a 16-point win at home, another top-rated 15-dime best bet release. And as I said at the outset of these minor league tournaments, and I'm talking about the NIT, the College Basketball Insider, the College Insider Tournament, that you often will find much, much more value in these tournaments than in the dance, because the odds makers simply overlook them because they don't care about them, just like the general public doesn't care about them either. So, as I've said over the years, you concentrate the most where the odds makers concentrate the least, and that's where you find the pickings to be much easier and the money to be much more bountiful. So I cashed in yesterday, and tonight I'm turning to the finals of the CBI tournament, where Coastal Carolina is hosting Wyoming. Now, what I like about the CBI tournament is it's a best of 3 championship series. Wouldn't it be great if all of the college basketball championship games were all, instead of a single elimination game, a best of 3 series? Couldn't you imagine that? Wouldn't that just be absolutely fantastic? That after you had the Final Four, instead of having a winner-take-all game on that Monday night, instead you started a best of 3 series? Just something, food for thought here. But anyway, you have Wyoming at Coastal Carolina tonight. So part of the educational stuff here tonight is, where is Coastal Carolina University located at? Come on, think. It is actually in Conway, South Carolina. And where is Conway, South Carolina? Yeah, well, hey, listen, at least I told you what the state was, and you probably had a guess that it was either in South Carolina or in North Carolina, since the university is called Coastal Carolina. But anyway, Conway, South Carolina is northwest of Myrtle Beach. And what is Coastal Carolina's nickname? And how do you pronounce it? Well, it's spelled Chanticleer, and it's Chanticleer. Chanticleer, not Chanticleer, Chanticleer. They call themselves a Chants. And what is a Chanticleer? Well, to be honest with you, if you go back to the Canterbury Tales, within the Canterbury Tales, there is another tale within that Geoffrey Chaucer collection of stories. It's a proud, fierce rooster that owns the barnyard. Thus, the athletic teams, they're proud, they're fierce, they're the Chanticleers. But again, it's not the Chanticleers, it's the Chanticleers, and they often call themselves the Chants. So there you go. In case you be on Jeopardy next week, you have the answer because Al DeMarco told you what the answer was. How about the state of South Carolina, though? What an amazing run the state of South Carolina has had in college athletics here. Coastal Carolina. And listen, I guarantee you, 98% of you out there, if I said to you, who won the College Baseball World Series last year, you'd think, one of the teams from Florida, one of the teams from California, one of the teams in the middle of the country. It was Coastal Carolina coming up with the upset. So Coastal Carolina wins the College World Series last year. You got Clemson pulling the upset of Alabama, right, in the national football game for the championship. You've got South Carolina, the Gamecocks, in the Final Four. You got the South Carolina women, who have advanced to the Elite Eight, and I think they are playing tonight with a chance to win and go and advance to the Final Four. You've got Furman alive in the College Insider Tournament, and you've got Coastal Carolina starting the best of 3 series tonight against Wyoming in the college basketball insider tournament. What is going on with the Wooder in South Carolina? It's crazy. The success that this state has had here of late. Okay, so that's where my best bet is going to be. One more reflection from yesterday. I turn on the game between North Carolina and Kentucky at the exact moment North Carolina is going to be inbounding the ball. There's a scramble at the floor. North Carolina is going to inbound the ball, and I go and I'm watching Kennedy Meeks inbound the ball. And I understand the philosophy in Roy Williams going to choose Kennedy Meeks because he's the worst free throw shooter among the guys on the floor for the Tar Heels at that moment. So naturally, in an obvious foul situation with the Tar Heels up and the clock winding down, you don't want Kentucky to foul your worst foul shooter because it would be the obvious choice. But at the same time, I'm going, Kennedy Meeks, the 6'10 center, this is not the guy you want inbounding the ball. This is the guy you want to be the recipient of the inbounds pass. And it amazes me still to this day, as much basketball as I've watched over the years from every single level of play, how guys internally in their mind, when the pressure's on them, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, 5 Mississippi. It's 5 seconds. You got to get the damn ball in or you got to call timeout. So you saw what happened. Kennedy Meeks, unable to get the ball in. Ball goes back to Kentucky. Kentucky immediately hits a three-pointer. We have a tie game. The game unfolds, and eventually, yes, North Carolina, rather than the game going to overtime, which is what you had to hope for, most of us, if you had North Carolina yesterday, most of us wanted that game to go to overtime. Instead, North Carolina hits it on the amazing game-ending shot, and they win by 2. But here at the site, naturally, my phone lights up immediately from all the guys that had Kentucky and North Carolina yesterday going, how am I going to rule the game? Well, the reality is this. My deadline for the handicappers here is 10 a.m. Eastern time on Saturday and Sunday. They had their plays up. So most of the guys had their plays up yesterday if they had a play on North Carolina and Kentucky by about 9:30 to 10 o'clock Eastern time. Right around 9:50, 9:55 Eastern time, most of the guys were posted. Well, by about 11:50, 11:55 Eastern time, that price dropped from 2.5 down to 2. And that's where it stayed right till tip-off shortly around, 5:05 Eastern time? It stayed at 2. So I ruled that if you had North Carolina, you take the loss. If you had Kentucky, you take the push. And ultimately, it's up to you to decide whether you won or lost and your handicapper made you money, cost you money, or just walked away with the push. Because that's the fair way to do it. A lot of guys in this business say, oh, what's the closing line? Well, the reality is very few people bet the closing line. So even the scoreboard, which, by the way, FYI, as you've noticed here on the site, I had them take down because they've been working on it nonstop past couple of weeks. And I got so sick and tired of seeing all the bad scores up there as they're working on a new system. When it's launched and all the bugs are out, it'll be relaunched again. But even the scoreboard system reflects a cost of the closing line as terms of whether a team is covered or not. But again, nobody grades a game by the closing line. That's just not real. 99% of the time, if you're betting a favorite, you're betting early. But if you're betting the dog, you're betting late. That North Carolina-Kentucky game, however, I think yesterday was one of those situations where you knew that at 2.5, the wise move was to wait because there was no way North Carolina was going to go up in price because we saw what Kentucky did against UCLA. You knew the public sentiment was going to be on the Wildcats, especially because had North Carolina looked that good against Arkansas, against Butler? No, the Tar Heels had not. And they certainly didn't deliver in the ACC tournament. So chances were that line was going to go down. And if you anticipated the line move, well, that's when you had to wait for North Carolina going against that 99% rule where you play favorites early and dogs late. And if you were on Kentucky yesterday, you had to anticipate, you had to get the Wildcats ASAP because you had to anticipate that the line was going to move. And that's something I think a lot of amateur gamblers, they just don't do. You have to look at the line and you have to anticipate where the public is going to move that price. And that's also why I often say that, you've got to have a couple of different, if you're playing offshore, a couple of different sports books to compare prices with. And if you're playing in Vegas, you've got to be aware that the price that you find at the Wynn is not going to be the price you find at the South Point. And it's not going to be the price that you're going to find at any of the Stations casinos. Everybody's going to have a little different price. Some guys are going to lean a little more heavy juice on the favorites than other casinos. It's just something you have to be aware of, and you've got to put in the time to have alternate sources. Some guys have written in here to customer service and asked, well, can I recommend a sports book for one reason or another, for favorites, for underdog betting, or, XYZ sports book, they're lousy in paying me, paying off. I can't get my money. I can't collect. I got to be honest with you guys. I don't recommend anybody, because I never have in the history here of these sites, because A, nobody's paying me to endorse it, and these guys are loaded with money. If we took sportsbook advertising, if it was legal to take it, and that's a fine line, I would be uber rich and I wouldn't be doing this anymore, okay? But Steve and I made a decision many, many, many years ago to pass up the millions of dollars we could have made over the years because of the gray area, whether taking sportsbook advertising was legal, being based in the United States at the time. So I don't make any recommendations. And at the same time, without knowing whether or not the sports books, how they operate, well, I'm certainly not going to put my personal seal of endorsement on any of them anyway. So that's the long and short of it. Let's get to the complimentary play. I like the Dallas Mavericks tonight as a slight home dog against Oklahoma City. Now, the Thunder are coming off a 137-125 loss at Houston. They were down 25 points entering the fourth quarter of that game. They're 14-21 on the road. It's not like Russell Westbrook didn't play well. Had another triple-double in that game. 39 points, 13 assists, 11 rebounds. The Thunder were 11-0 this season in games he had triple-doubles prior to losing to the Rockets. The Thunder allowed Houston to shoot 71% in the first half. 63.3% for the game. That's the Rockets' best shooting percentage in any single NBA game since 1995. Mavericks coming off a 94-86 loss to Toronto on Saturday. That was a home game as well. These two teams have split their matchups this season. The Thunder won the first game back on January 26th at home, 109-98. Westbrook, he struggled that night at 45 points. And the rematch, the Mavericks won 104-89 at home March 5th. Westbrook, 29 points. But that was a different Mavericks team, one that had changed many of its parts, and the Mavericks are continuing to change their parts because, listen, they're 3.5 games out of the final playoff berth, pretty much out of contention at this stage with just 10 games left in the regular season. So Rick Carlisle's made some moves. He's moved Seth Farrell, who has played so well in the second half of the season at small forward, over to the starting point guard spot, putting Yogi Ferrell on the bench. Dallas is 3-5 in its last 8 games. But considering that the Thunder are coming off yet another defenseless loss, a game which they couldn't absolutely stop anybody, and considering the Mavericks have a little rest on their side, I just like Dallas in this game as your complimentary play. So Dallas is your free pick. I wish you well, guys, and I'll talk to you again tomorrow when we do this one more time.